Hey everyone, welcome back to another art video. I'm Joanna Hill with J Hill Fine Art. Today I'll be sharing this painting of pancakes I painted with gouache. I forgot to hit the record button on the first portion of this project, so I will have to demonstrate my transfer and color blocking method on another stack of pancakes I used for a workshop last week. Then I'll skip over to where I left off. So first I'm going to be using my Huion light pad to trace my design onto my painting surface. Then I'm going to outline it with a waterproof ink pen. Once I'm done outlining everything in ink, I'm going to go over it with my kneaded eraser and just erase my pencil lines. I don't want the graphite discoloring any of the pigments in the paint. So I just went through all of my gouache paints and decided to use just a few to create my palette. So I'm definitely using gray. This is the Turner Designer Gouache in gray. This is the Neutral Gray 5. And I've got a couple other ones here. I've got Holbein, so I've got the Turner Gouache, I've got M.Graham Titanium White, Holbein Yellow Ochre, Permanent Yellow Deep, Burnt Umber, Brilliant Orange, Lemon Yellow, and then I'm also using Winsor Newton Spectrum Red. So these are the colors that I'm primarily using. So I created a color chart and I just kind of played around with the colors, you know, as I used the color picker on my Photoshop program. I noticed that where they were on the color scales, a lot of them were sort of in the gray area, so a lot of them had gray mixed into it. They weren't fully saturated colors. I just kind of mixed the different reds and oranges that I have and kind of created these colors. So it's important to have a little bit of a roadmap. Write down your color mixes after you've sort of played with them and kind of got some combinations that you like. Just make some notes on how you did it. Most of these are all in Acrylic Gouache, so I am using those as my underpainting. Acrylic Gouache, if you are not familiar with this, these are a Holbein product also, and they are mixed with acrylic polymers, so when they dry, they do not reactivate with water. Traditional gouache will reactivate with water, and you can sort of keep working it. These ones you cannot. The colors that I had named out earlier, those are the traditional gouache tubes. I'm going to be using the same colors just in the acrylic gouache, and I'm going to use that for my color blocking. Here are the colors in the acrylic gouache version, so lemon yellow, yellow, yellow ochre, orange, carmine, and sepia, and white. For my palette, I'm just using a regular old tin that had some Derwent drawing pencils in there. It's just a nice, easy, flat surface. I can put a little piece of palette paper in there. You don't have to use the palette paper, but with the acrylic gouache, because it dries like acrylic paint, I like to use something I can just throw away. With the traditional gouache, I can put it right on the tin and just literally wash it off. So this just makes it for easier cleanup. I don't have gray in acrylic gouache, so I am going to use the Turner traditional gouache in gray, but it'll mix with the acrylic polymer that are in these other tubes, so it's going to be just fine. Okay, now we're ready to paint. I've got a fresh cup of coffee, and I've got my pens, and I've got my paintbrushes. I'm just going to be color blocking, so if you are not sure what that means, color blocking is just simply adding a single color to a given space. I try to go for the local color of that area. So if I were to color block this blueberry, I would use some sort of bluish tone or purple tone or whatever color I see most of. The majority of that color is what I would block it in as. I'm adding gray to most of these colors. One, because that's sort of the color that the color picker pointed out to me in most of the areas when I was sort of studying the reference photo. I also want to control the saturation of the colors. I don't want it too overly vibrant just yet. Good rule of thumb is to use the largest brush that you can control in a given area. One, that's going to save you time, and two, you'll also become a bit of a faster painter. You can make this as simple or complicated as you like. Whatever is going to be easier for you to know what colors to put where, what values to put where. You're basically making yourself a roadmap for color placement later. In a nutshell, that is color blocking. So let's go ahead and skip over to the actual painting, and I'll show you what I've gotten done on there so far. Here's what the large stack of pancakes looks like color blocked. The footage that covers me painting the butter and the syrup was unfortunately the part that was unrecorded, but you do see me going back to work on various parts of it later in the video. I use the same techniques on the painting throughout, so hopefully you can understand how to use them to create similar items in your own work. The paper I'm using today is the Fabriano Artistico Aquarello hot pressed watercolor paper. I prefer hot pressed paper for gouache paint as it enables me to get a much smoother application. Cold pressed is nice, but it's a little too toothy for me, but it's really great for getting more textures if you're using a lot of dry brushing applications. But I find that I can still get some good dry brushing texture even with the hot pressed. So here I am just starting to do some dry brush techniques, and I have very limited amount of water in my paint. Sometimes if I have too much water on my brush, I'll just kind of gently lay it down on a paper towel to soak up any excess water, and then I'll just take a really light hand and just brush it fairly quickly across my surface just to get those nice broken lines, and that just gives it more of that bready texture. Here I am dry brushing more paint with some different values to create more depth. I'm being careful not to use too much pressure as I don't want those layers underneath to reactivate and smudge. I went ahead and added some raw umber to my palette. I wanted to deepen the shadow values and really up the contrast, so I wanted something just a little bit darker. I could have used black in my palette, but I really don't want to use black. I don't use black often. I find that it's a little bit of a flatter looking color, and I wanted this painting to be very warm, and I wanted warm shadows just to sort of emphasize that warm feeling you get when you look at a stack of pancakes. The section that I'm working on right now is the shadow side of the pancakes, so all the colors that I'm going to be using are going to have some gray mixed in with them. Anytime you have color that is in shadow, they're always going to be a little bit cooler and also less intense. So it's a good idea to add either some gray or even some complementary colors into your mix just to knock back that intensity. As I continue to work each layer, I'm thinking about the shapes of each color and value I see in my reference photo. I try to paint the largest areas of color first, then the next largest, and so on, until I have small areas of detail left. This is a great way to simplify complicated areas of color. It is so easy to want to jump to the details because that's the most exciting part of the painting, but you really have to focus on building up what's beneath those details. Another interesting characteristic about gouache is that when you're using darker colors, they will tend to dry looking a little lighter. And then when you're also painting on lighter colors, they will dry and look almost a little darker. So it is a little tricky to sort of navigate what colors to use, but I tend to try to be a little bit more flexible with this particular medium. That way I don't get too hung up on getting things absolutely perfect. So at this point, I have layered quite a bit of color onto the painting. If you noticed, I generally work from dark to light and light to dark. This is one of the best characteristics about gouache paint. So here I am going to start working on the syrup that's dripping down the side. So I'm looking for values, looking for where my lights and my darks are, painting in the largest areas of value and color that I see, and working my way smaller. Getting the lighting was really tricky for me, as I haven't done a lot of studying in light refraction. I've done a fair amount, so I kind of have a general idea of how lighting should look in different substances, but I really sort of struggled with this because I didn't really have a great reference photo to work from, but I tried my best and I ended up kind of going over these areas several times until it looked okay. So here I am just adding some more small details. I've got a liner brush and I'm just making sure that I have some really nice crisp edges, really wanting to bring out some of that contrast. Now I'm just working on the bottom stack of the pancakes, still working from large areas of color, large areas of value to smaller, just really working that foundation, building up those layers. Another good tip is to check your work against your reference photo as you go along. Take a step back from your work, compare your painting to your reference. Your eyes will easily pick up areas that need to be worked on, whether that is increasing contrast or smoothing out areas of too much texture. Throughout my process, I'm always adjusting where I have painted and studying the reference so I know what direction I need to make my painting go in. I hope you enjoyed watching so far and have learned something new. This is by far one of the most easy to learn painting mediums, and I know you will enjoy it too. Now that the painting's complete, I'm going to take my micron pens and I'm just going to go around and embellish certain areas just to give it a little extra pop. I've got one micron pen in a sepia color and another in just black. And they're both very close in color, so it doesn't really matter which one you would decide to use, but I really did kind of like the sepia color as it went better with the palette that I used. But I did use both here and there if I wanted some extra dark values or maybe just slightly darker. It's very easy to overdo it when you are adding in extra lines, but it really does help the picture, I think, in giving it just some extra crispness and sharpening up lines and deepening some values. And I went over and did little bits of hatching throughout some of the areas of shadow, and I just really think this pulls everything together into that sort of illustrative style that I'm looking for, and it's just so easy to do, and it just makes everything look really nice. At this point, I'm just adding some finishing touches and the painting is pretty much completed. Thank you so much for watching. This painting was a lot of fun and I hope you learned a lot. Feel free to join me on my live streams where I'm going to be doing live gouache painting and drawing, color pencil and oil painting and more. Thanks for watching.